some phone calls saying to the world that since Hamas is not legitimate, let's work together with the national movement of the Palestinians, with those that are willing to accept the right of Israel to exist, with those that renounce violence and terrorism, with those that are part of former agreements between Israel and the Palestinians, those that are willing to end the conflict. But the only way to do so is when the entire international community delegitimates Hamas with us. But it doesn't work when Israeli leadership is just talking about the threats. It's not working when the Israeli leadership is just asking the world to stick together or to work against terror without opening new hope for peace. As an Israeli interest, not as a favor to them. And the same interest of Israel that you can hear today from any Israeli leader, including the Israeli Prime Minister. These were the same interests that we kept while negotiating with the Palestinians. The future Palestinian state is going to be demilitarized. The Palestinians accepted it. The border is going to take in consideration blocks of settlements that takes only a few percentage of the West Bank, and the Palestinians knows this. The agreement is going to be end of conflict and end of claims, and the creation of the Palestinian state is the answer to the national aspiration of the Palestinians, and the meaning is ending the conflict in accordance to the idea of two states for two peoples, that each state gives an answer to the national aspiration of its people. It's feasible. It's there. It's not easy, though. Tough decisions ahead for any Israeli leader. Problematic situation on the Palestinian side. Different trends and uncertainty on the Arab world. But there is no option of doing nothing. This is the worst decision ever made for the future of the state of Israel, to do nothing. Now, it's not too late. We are now in June. September is not here yet. And since there is an agreement between the different parts of the Palestinian society and politics, Hamas and Fatah, but the Palestinian government was not established yet. So we can change realities. And the only way to change realities that we are facing ahead is to relaunch negotiations now. To say to the Palestinians, we are going to negotiate with a government that accepts the requirements of the international community. This can stop September as well. And I can assure you that in not doing so, in the future, even when we hopefully relaunch negotiations, it's going to be with worse terms of reference for future agreement. Time is of the essence, is not working for all those that believes that two states for two peoples is an Israeli interest. Now, I'm not going, to sweep things under the carpet. There is part of the Israeli society and of the Jewish people, those that believe that the vision of the state of Israel should be having Jews living on the entire land. And I can assure you that I feel the same feelings toward the ancient land of Israel. I believe in the historical, biblical, judicial, and moral rights of the Jewish people on the entire land. But this is not the question anymore. The decisions is not about who has more rights on the land. It's about how can we create a better future for our children and generations to come. And for those believing in the idea and the vision of having Jews living on the entire land, for them, any day that passes by is another day of victory. Let's not make decisions. Let's just speak against the world, do nothing, stick together in our just cause. With all due respect, it's not enough, it's not responsible, and this is the role and responsibility of any Israeli leader to make these decisions. And my responsibility as the head of the Israeli opposition is not just to come here to speak about the threats and to speak about the need to be united against, but also to speak about decisions that we need to make. This is the decision that Israel needs to make. And, ladies and gentlemen, we need your support also on these decisions. Thank you.
We can accept a couple of questions.
Just a pen. I'll take some questions together. Pen. To that. Okay.
Madam Livni, first of all, thank you for a most passionate speech, which I think re-energized many of us. It's great to hear that the leaders in Israel still have that passion which you just demonstrated. But I'd like to ask you a direct question, a very simple question. One, making decisions. Would you today, based on your vision of a two-state solution which is viable and doable, would you today negotiate and sit down and sign a deal with Fatah when it is in partnership with Hamas? Question number one. And would you today,
only one question,
having heard, it's a related question, having heard the principles of the government as articulated by Prime Minister Netanyahu most recently, would you on those principles join the government today in a coalition?
Another question?
Madam Chairwoman, thank you very much. I share Moshe's compliment on the great passion that you bring in the greatest tradition of Israeli leadership. Question is this. Chairman Abbas, President Abbas, has stated as a requirement for negotiations that Israel completely stop building in Jerusalem, which he's calling a settlement, and east of the 49 armistice lines. And the second requirement for Mr. Abbas is that Israel accept the 1967 lines. Do you agree?
Territory.
The 1967 lines is the basis for territory, the basis for negotiations. My question to you, Madam, do you agree with Mr. Abbas or do you disagree with Mr. Abbas?
Okay, more questions? In the minds of
our opponents, it has always been a religious conflict. What if, no matter what decision we make, that is their perception? What then?
You want to go?
A question, last question. Madam Livni, do you, yes or not, accept the conditions that the Prime Minister put concerning the unity of Jerusalem? I'm speaking especially about all the old city, about the Bikat as a Yarden position, about the not coming back to the border 67. If yes, okay. If yes, yeah. If no, if yes, why you don't join immediately the government? And if no, it's your. I would like to know about that.
Yes, thank you. Well, answering your questions about relaunching negotiations, what are the conditions, and whether I would speak with Fatah and not Hamas. Well, when you are talking about our opponents, there are those that for them Israel shouldn't exist. They are not willing to say that Israel has the right to exist. They are using terror in order to prevent us from living here. And they are not fighting for the establishment of a Palestinian state, but they are fighting in order to deprive us from our right to exist. Well, there are those in the region, and by the way, I don't think that by signing an agreement with the Palestinians, it's not a fairy tale. I don't think that we are going to face a new Middle East. We are not going to live happily ever after the day after. And it is a tough neighborhood, but the real question is, what can we do in order to shape the future and to change the trend? And in a way, it's a kind of a train coming forward, what need to do in order to shift the train. Now, there are those that for them the conflict is religious one, but there are those that they are truly fighting for the existence or for the establishment of a Palestinian state. This is according to my understanding. Abu Mazen, Fatah, they represent the national aspiration of Palestinians for a state. And even though I have my own discussions with them and disagreements with them, what's going to be the future borders of the Palestinian state, which are the future borders, legitimate borders of the state of Israel, what's going to be with our interest, this is part of the negotiations. But basically, my understanding, after 9 months of negotiations, that they understand and they want to end the conflict in accordance to the idea of 2 states for 2 peoples, while in the negotiations room, well, believe me, it's tough. And talking about this interest, it's funny, because part of Netanyahu's speeches were taken from Kadima platform. But you know what is the difference? Because he's using this interest of Israel in order not to enter the negotiations room when I kept all these interests in the negotiations room. And it's not enough to speak about this. The more he speaks about this, the more you find more and more conditions before entering the negotiations room. I was not asked to free settlement. I was not asked to say 67 lines. And you know why? Because they trusted me. Not because I'm going to give up the Israeli interest. Because they knew that I'm going to keep the interest in the negotiations room. And I was willing, and I paid in a political capital in order to do so. I didn't leave each and every meeting in the negotiations room in order to say that there is no partner on the other side, and believe me, it's easy to do so. Nothing was leaked until the Al Jazeera leaks from the negotiations room, and I didn't say publicly that I didn't negotiate Jerusalem, but I was not willing to take Jerusalem off the table because I knew that this is going to be the end of negotiations, and I paid politically in order to do so. And the trust was there in the negotiations room after 1 meeting. They didn't ask me to say before, but after a few hours, they discovered that I'm serious. But after a few hours, between Abu Mazen and Netanyahu, their decision, not mine, is different. I offered Netanyahu different coalitions, Mr. Habib. He doesn't want to. This is the coalition that his choice. Is natural partners, as he called them. So with all due respect, I think that my responsibility is to keep this alternative for peace, not just to be united against, not just to ask others to accept before the negotiations our own interest. And you tell me, is Israel stronger now? Is Jerusalem safer now? Is Israel's security now is being kept? Or while he's talking about it, there are more and more question marks and more demands from Israel. I said to him, let's write together the first chapter of the Israeli Constitution. What does it mean, a Jewish state, for example, for all of us? Because I believe that Likud is a national and liberal party as Kadima. I said, not just speak about the deal breakers, but also about the deal makers. It's not about finding the right words to do so. And as I said before about the lines and the future borders, they understand that there are going to be adjustment to the 67 lines. And the real question is, what is the responsibility of an Israeli leader? To take this interest, to use them as political cards. Because, when I'm watching both of them, Abu Mazen and Netanyahu, both of them are standing on icebergs. When the people, maybe like Mount Sinai, are looking at them, and they are blaming each other when they get the applause by their own people. But these are all icebergs, and the water, believe me, are freezing. Thank you.